You recently responded to President Trump's Truth Social post regarding the Save America Act, saying that if he's going to not sign any bills until it's passed, because the Senate's going to be in a total gridlock. Can you just explain, isn't this sort of a stabbing back to the American people who 85% of them, 85% of voters support voter ID?
Yes, but their bill isn't voter ID, number one. It is about voter registration. It allows ICE to kick tens of millions of people off the rolls, and they don't tell them until Election Day, and you show up and you say, you're not registered anymore, you're not registered here, you're not on the rolls. And they say, I didn't know that. This is a bill that destroys the country, and it is not about showing ID when you show up to vote. It's about the voter registration rolls, destroying them, purging them, not letting people know, and taking the rights in a algorithm put together by ICE, put together by Doge and Musk. It's an outrage, and that's why so many people don't want to pass it. Yes.
So we got to talk about what I can only describe as pure panic coming from the left right now, because host Simone Sanders just went out there and basically admitted what a lot of us already knew. Democrats have backed themselves into a corner on this issue. They walked right into a trap, and now they don't know how to get out of it. And the issue I'm talking about is the SAVE Act. Republicans, along with the Trump administration, have successfully forced a national conversation about voter ID and election integrity. Two things that Democrats have been trying to avoid for years. And now it's front and center. It's in Congress, it's in the Senate, it's being debated, and Democrats are scrambling. Now, here's what's really going on. Republicans are pushing the SAVE Act, and Democrats are opposing it, but not in a straightforward, honest way. Instead, they're trying to reframe the argument. They're trying to say, oh, no, we don't oppose voter ID. We support voter ID. But the problem with the SAVE Act, according to them, is that it requires proof of citizenship to register to vote. And I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute, that's the issue? That's the controversial part, verifying that someone is actually a citizen before they vote in the United States? That's what we are debating now? Because to me, that's just common sense. I honestly feel like doing this. Like, because how could you? How could you be against the basic common sense of it, right? It's a slap in the face to Americans, but it's really a slap in the face to Democrats because it's really showing their true colors, right? So it's a double sword. It's affecting Americans when it comes to them fighting over something that's a common sense policy, let alone not making sure that national security is upheld at our airports. So you got TSA workers suffering, all for the simple fact of a common sense policy when it comes to voter ID, verifying who you say you are when it comes to election integrity in our elections in the United States. So now you have to wonder why the karma is taking place, and now the Democrats are basically getting slapped in the face just like this. And that should be the bare minimum, right? When it comes to verification, when it comes to elections altogether, of you just saying you are who you say you are. If you're going to participate in the most fundamental right in a constitutional republic, choosing your leaders, you should probably be a citizen of that country. That's not extreme. That's not radical. That's not controversial. But Democrats, as usual, are going back to their same tired playbook. They're saying it's racist, it's bigoted, it's going to disenfranchise people, women, minorities, the LGBTQ community, you name it. Apparently, according to them, this law is going to hurt everybody except straight white males. And that right there should tell you everything you need to know about how they actually think, these Democrats, because they are saying this. Because have you ever noticed something? They never, ever say that straight white males are going to have trouble voting. They never say suburban white voters are going to be disenfranchised. It's always the same groups they claim are at risk. And why is that? Why is it that we talk about showing ID or proving citizenship, Democrats immediately jump to the conclusion that certain groups just won't be able to do it? The answer is pretty obvious when you really think about it. It's because they don't believe those people are capable. They believe they are dumb, ignorant, and they don't think they're responsible enough or competent enough to meet basic requirements like getting ID or verifying who they say they are. And once you understand that, everything else starts to make sense, because the very people Democrats claim to be protecting are the same people they are implicitly saying aren't smart enough to function within a basic system of accountability. And again, you know this is true because they never apply that logic across the board. It's selective, it's targeted, and it reveals a whole lot more about their worldview than probably intend to admit. So now we're in this situation where Democrats are trying to walk this tightrope. They're saying they support voter ID, but they oppose the SAVE Act because it goes too far. And that brings us to what Chuck Schumer had to say, as you guys have seen in the clip. When he was pressed on the exact issue, what do Democrats actually support when it comes to election integrity? Because the answer, as you've seen, is not nearly as clear as they want you to believe. So hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and I want you guys to check out this next clip.
You, Senator, because I know you're against the Save America Act, what kind of voter ID could you support? Is there a middle ground?
Look, Democrats support voter ID, and many states do, but that's not what the SAVE Act does. It will purge tens of millions of Americans from the voting lists, and they won't even know they're purged till they show up at the polling place and they say you're purged. And what is the mechanism for purging them? Doge, what Elon Musk put in terms of the policies of what to do. Do people want ICE to determine who should vote and who should not vote? That is so un-American. So the SAVE Act goes way, way beyond mere voter ID when you show up at the election place. It goes to purging it's estimated 20, 30, 40 million Americans would not be allowed to vote if this act took effect. It is outrageous, and as I have said, it is Jim Crow 2.0. It's
So
doing
forget
the
the SAVE
same
Act,
kind
but
of
is
thing
there
that has been done.
Is not the Save America Act or SAVE Act, but is there some kind of voter ID you could vote for?
Yes, there is. Democrats have voted for voter ID at the polling places over and over again. And that's not the issue with the SAVE Act.
Okay. Senator Chuck Schumer.
So you heard that in plain English. Chuck Schumer, when he's actually pressed on this issue, when someone finally asks him directly, okay, is there any middle ground here? Do Democrats support any form of election integrity at all? Do you believe we should verify anything before people vote? His answer is, of course, Democrats support voter ID. That's what he said. He's essentially trying to signal that, yeah, Democrats are reasonable and they are not against basic safeguards. They'll be willing to support something like voter ID. But here's where it gets interesting, because almost immediately you got people like Simone Sanders sounding the alarm, saying this was a mistake, saying Democrats are walking straight into a trap by even conceding that point publicly. And that tells you everything you need to know, because if voter ID was truly something Democrats supported, there wouldn't be panic when one of their top leaders says it out loud on national television. The reality is they understand exactly what Republicans are doing here. Republicans are forcing them in a position where they either have to support common sense election integrity measures or openly oppose them, and then explain that to the American people. And that's a losing position for Democrats, which is why Simone Sanders is freaking out about it. And now she tries to make this argument comparing voting to things like opening a bank account, saying, well, you need ID to do that. And she's right, but not in the way she thinks, because the reality is, in many parts of this country, especially in blue states, it is actually harder to open a bank account than it is to vote. Let that sink in. You have more verification, more safeguards, more identity checks to access your own money than you do to participate in deciding who runs the country. And that is a massive problem. And what Simone Sanders conveniently leaves out is that a lot of these states she's defending don't even follow the basic election integrity practices she's talking about. They don't clean up their voter rolls consistently. They don't enforce strict verification processes. There's very little incentive for them to do so. Now, let's just be honest about why that system benefits them politically, right? The looser the rules, the less verification required, the easier it is for questionable ballots to get through. And that overwhelmingly works in their favor. I'm going to say it again for the people in the back. Let's be honest about why there's very little incentive to do so when it comes to enforcing strict verification processes. When it comes to cleaning up their voter rolls, the Democrats in blue states, The looser the rules, the less verification required. The easier it is for questionable ballots to get through. And that overwhelmingly works in their favor. That's the uncomfortable truth that nobody on the left wants to say out loud. They want voting to be as easy as frictionless as possible. And even if that means lowering the standard of verification to the point where it barely exists. And look, I know people get uncomfortable when you say this, but we need to be precise with our language here. Voting should be easy for people who are eligible and who have proven that they are who they say they are. Once you've done that, once you verify your identity and your citizenship, then yes, it should be simple, quick, accessible to cast your ballot. Now I want you guys to see what Simone Sanders was saying in regards of sounding that alarm that I mentioned to you guys earlier on.
You know, I have been warning about this for weeks, and now here we are. In trying to oppose the SAVE Act, Democrats have actually backed themselves into a corner, and now we're potentially staring down a vote on a national voter ID bill. Let me ask a very simple question. Since when is the Democratic Party for voter ID? Because let's be very clear about what is actually happening. The Save America Act is not about voter ID. It is about requiring proof of citizenship, talking passports, birth certificates. Some of these are papers that millions of eligible Americans do not have access to. Oh, and if you are a married woman who has changed your last name, well, good luck. This is a completely different standard. But instead of forcing that distinction, instead of solely having that conversation, the conversation has now collapsed into, do you support voter ID or not? And that, folks, is a trap. Because the argument for voter ID is actually built on a premise that does not hold up. People are not showing up to the polls pretending to be someone else in droves. That's actually not a widespread problem. We already verify identity in multiple ways throughout the country. Signature matching, right? Flawed, but a way to verify. Voter files, database checks. I mean, in everyday life, you can move money, verify who you are, without pulling out a physical ID.
And that's where I say that actually when it comes to your own money, it is more strict to open a bank account when it comes to the verification process. And that's the conversation she's not being very genuine about. She's being very disingenuous when she's not being honest for the simple fact that voting is more easier than opening a bank account. And that's the truth. So she's making it like it's easy to move your money when it's really not. So what should not be easy is just showing up with no verification or no accountability, no proof, and being handed one of the most powerful privileges in this country. That's not protecting democracy. That's undermining it. And the idea that requiring basic identification or proof of citizenship is somehow this massive burden is just not grounded in reality that she's mentioning here. Because the vast majority of Americans, people of average intelligence, people who are even moderately responsible, have no issue obtaining an ID, no issue proving who they are, no issue meeting these basic requirements. The only people who consistently run into problems with that are people who, quite frankly, are not taking responsibility for their own lives. And those are the very people Democrats seem most concerned about when it comes to voting laws. And yes, that includes non-citizens as well, which is the part they really don't want to talk about. So when Simone Sanders here says Democrats are falling into a trap, what she's really saying is that Democrats are being forced to publicly defend a position that doesn't make sense to most Americans because they already framed the argument themselves. They said, we support voter ID. The problem with the SAVE Act is the citizenship requirement. But if you actually follow that logic through, it completely falls apart because if you truly support election integrity, then verifying citizenship isn't some radical overreach. It's the foundation of the entire system.
What problem are we actually solving here? We're not solving one. What this does is shift the frame from access to restriction. And once you concede that frame, you are no longer arguing about whether people can vote. You're actually arguing about how hard it should be. And now because of that shift, we are talking about a national voter ID bill while the Save America Act is still looming in the background. I clearly have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of questions. We had Senator Jackie Rosen of Nevada on our show Thursday night, and we pressed her about it. I asked her all of the things I just said to you here. And this is what she had to say. Schumer is saying that Democrats would vote for a national voter ID bill, and now at least there's one Republican senator that is talking about bringing it to the floor under unanimous consent. Signature, I don't think the question on the table isn't whether people want to verify who they are when they go to vote. A voter ID is about the fact that Republicans are saying that people are going to vote as other people who they aren't. That's not an issue in America, so why would Democrats support that?
You know, I'm not sure what Leader Schumer was talking about, but I can tell you this. I guess we ought to have a conversation.
Seems like Democrats need to have a conversation.
There you have it, folks. So if the Democrats, if you truly support election integrity, like I said, verifying citizenship isn't some radical overreach. And deep down, these Democrats know that, which is exactly why, despite what Chuck Schumer says on TV, when it actually comes time to vote on these policies, they won't support them. So the truth here is simple, pretty simple. Democrats don't actually support voter ID. They say they do when they're put on the spot, but when you look at their actions, when you look at how they respond, the second it becomes a real legislative possibility, it completely falls apart. And that's exactly what Simone Sanders is worried about. She understands that by even entertaining this conversation, Democrats have walked themselves into a political trap, because now they publicly said, we support voter ID. We just don't support the SAVE Act because it goes further than that. Okay, fine. If that's your position, then the next logical step for Republicans, especially if they are serious about exposing this, should be very straightforward. Pass a clean voter ID bill. No extra provisions, no add-ons, no wiggle room for Democrats to hide behind. Just a simple standalone bill that says you need identification to vote. That's it. Because Democrats have already told us that's something they support, right? Is my point. So give them exactly what they claim to want and put it on the record. Force the vote, send it through the House, bring it to the Senate, and make every single Democrat answer the question: do you actually support voter ID or not? And we all know what's going to happen. They're not going to vote for it. They're going to come up with some excuse. They might do like how they just treated Senator John Kennedy yesterday, as of recording this video, yesterday as of March 22nd on Sunday. John Kennedy was like, look, if you don't want to open up the government, make sure these TSA workers get paid, then guess what? I don't believe that we should get paid up here in Congress since we stalling. Mind you, they're about to go into spring recess soon. So the Democrat just walked out and said they object and said nothing else, left Senator John Kennedy hanging, right? And that's basically what the Democrats would do. They'll say they object and most likely walk out. And it's a slap in the face to Americans, and let alone ignorant. And it's a spit in the face to Americans to show you that they're rather discredit your vote and protect the illegals. So like I'm saying, they're going to come up with some excuse. They're going to pivot. They're going to move the goalposts, and eventually they're going to fall right back into their default argument that is racist, that is discriminatory, and that is somehow going to prevent Black Americans from voting. Which again carries that same underlying implication that certain groups of people just aren't capable or dumb of obtaining basic identification. That's where this always ends up. And when that happens, it exposes the entire game. It shows that this was never about the specifics of the SAVE Act. It was never about going too far. It was about opposing voter ID altogether while trying to avoid the political consequences of saying it out loud. And meanwhile, Republicans are doing exactly what they should be doing politically, which is turning this into a national conversation heading into the midterms. Because this is an issue where the public is overwhelmingly on the side of common sense. And people understand that showing ID to vote is not some extreme requirement. That's why you're seeing movements pop up all across the country right now. You got ballot initiatives gaining traction, signatures being collected, and states preparing to put voter ID directly in front of voters. Last I checked, you got states like Nevada, Michigan, North Carolina, even California looking at some form of voter ID measure on the ballot in the midterms. Think about that. Even in places that traditionally lean left, this issue is gaining enough momentum to force a vote. And that should tell you everything about where the American people actually stand on this. So now the question becomes whether Republican voters are going to show up and capitalize on that momentum, whether they're going to take advantage of the fact that this issue is front and center, or whether Democrats are going to somehow manage to muddy the waters again and avoid being held accountable. Because make no mistake, this is shaping up to be one of the defining issues going into the midterm. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into some specific states and what's actually happening on the ground.
The truth.
And before we get to that, I want you guys to see what's happening on the floor, and then I'll get to the states and what's happening on the ground.
The truth eventually will get out. Democrats have spent the last week or two attempting to hedge on photo ID, to suggest that, in fact, Democrats actually support photo ID. It's just the rest of the Save America Act, I should say, that they're concerned about. So on Thursday, the junior Republican senator from Ohio decided to give them an opportunity to do something about it. Not interested in the rest of the Save America Act's common sense proposals? Okay, he said, and he offered a clean photo ID bill. No other provisions, just a measure to require showing photo ID at the polls, which could be a driver's license or state ID card, a passport, a military ID, a tribal ID. And Democrats, Mr. President? Democrats, the party that the Democrat leader said does not object to photo ID, well, Democrats blocked it. So as it turns out, Democrats support photo ID for voters just as long as you don't ask them to actually support a photo ID bill. They want to have their cake and eat it too.
And there you have it. And that's what I'm saying. It comes down to what I just said, and this proves my point with Senator John Thune, right? This issue is front and center. And if Democrats are going to somehow manage to muddy the waters again, avoid being held accountable, make no mistake, this is defining the midterms, because it's forcing and backing Democrats into the corner to just answer the question: do you support voter ID? Yes or no? Stop playing the game, stop playing the political theatrics, and get down to business for the sake of Americans and patriots and, American citizens, right? Election integrity should be upheld. Simple as that. So, with that being said, the Republicans are doing right in cornering them to stop playing games, because you got to put people in the corner sometimes to really get the truth. It's a shame because it's like pulling teeth, and it's a shame because now you got TSA workers suffering as pawns for the simple fact of the political games that these Democrats want to play. Now, let's talk about what's on the ground, like I was mentioning before. I want you guys to check this out.
More tonight on an effort to place a voting measure on Michigan's November ballot is moving ahead. Thousands of signatures have been submitted to the Secretary of State on a ballot question supporters say will ensure only U.S. citizens can vote.
Up North Live's Remington Hernandez has more on the measure and why critics say it could actually make it harder for you to vote. That's in tonight's Covering the Capitol report.
Americans for Citizen Voting says they handed in more than 750,000 signatures from all 83 counties using more than 17,000 volunteers.
The Americans for Citizen Voting ballot campaign says the signatures represent an overwhelming bipartisan show of support for election integrity.
We saw in 2024 that non-citizens did vote in Michigan's election, and yet nothing has been done to reform that system to make certain that it doesn't happen again. Well, this ballot measure will make certain that it doesn't happen again.
The initiative would require photo ID to cast a ballot and implement a systematic review of Michigan's qualified voter file. It's already illegal for non-citizens to vote, and Michigan requires ID at the ballot box. But the campaign says that's not enough.
If they don't have ID under current constitutional provisions, they simply sign a piece of paper and their ballot goes into the stack and is counted. And we think it's important that people show ID and not have an easy loophole.
The Michigan Secretary of State's office continues to insist there's no evidence non-citizens have voted at a significant rate, and says only 15 non-citizens cast a ballot in the 2024 general election.
15, too many for me. Too much. No. We're not doing that. You can't sit there and say there's no proof of it and say, oh, it's only 15. Democrats always try to make this argument every single time. Oh, voter fraud doesn't really happen. It's so rare. It's insignificant. And then when you actually point out cases where it has happened, suddenly the argument shifts to, well, it's not a lie. It's not a big deal. So which one is it? Does it never happen? Or does it happen and we're just supposed to ignore it? Because if 15 non-citizens have been able to vote, The question is, why should they have gotten by and being able to vote in the first place? And why you think it's okay just to say it's only 15? Because 15, if you let this pass, for non-Democrats, you let one, they do it with taxes, right? They tax you a little bit, they tax you a little bit more, and it just leads to a trail of continuing to tax you to death. Because you give them an inch, they take a mile. Oh, they'll say, oh, we'll just tax you a little bit just to help, do a humanitarian act to help those the less fortunate. But indirectly, they're saying illegals to get health care, to basically help them build entitlement to feel looked after so they can be a dedicated voter base to keep Democrats in power. But they're not going to tell you that. See, when someone is doing something they know that's not right, do you think they're going to sit there and tell you their plan and what they're doing? Because if you think about it, for example, a criminal obviously mindset is to obviously find loopholes to not abide by the law. They want the easy way. They want the quick way. They want the quick outcome. So why would they sit there and think why would they sit there and think just because the whole idea of a criminal is not to get caught, right? By police. So the reality is, if a criminal does things with the anticipation not to get caught, why would you think that it would be any difference with these Democrats if they're saying, oh, there's no proof of non-citizens voting, when it was an overwhelming majority of a vote to make this candidate obviously surpass the goal line to obviously win the elections, and then when you do an audit, is all these other numbers that don't justify to be actual persons. So the whole point is, oh, it's only 15. It's not a big deal. And then once you let that slide, then it becomes 15, 20, 25, 30. You get where I'm going with this? So the whole point is, of course, they're not going to show no proof or leave no tracks behind in regards to justify that there were non-citizens. But see, we still got 15 coming up that's not citizens. So which one is it? Is it not a big deal? It's not a lot, or it's not a big deal, or it doesn't happen? So last time I checked, those are real people, real votes and real elections. That's 15 people whose votes were effectively canceled out. I thought that this was the party that claims to care about democracy. I thought this was the party that says, yes, every vote matters. Because here's the reality they don't want to admit. When you allow non-citizens, illegal immigrants, or otherwise ineligible individuals to vote, you are directly disfranchising legal voters. You are diluting their vote. You are taking away the value of their voice in the election. And that is the definition of disenfranchisement. And yet somehow they managed to flip the script and pretend like requiring basic verification is the real threat to democracy. And it makes no sense unless you actually understand the political incentives behind it. And another thing that's just so amazing to watch is how Democrats suddenly become allergic to red tape and bureaucracy, but only when it comes to protecting elections. And anywhere else in government, they love red tape. They thrive on it. When it comes to regulations, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to how you spend your money, they'll bury you in paperwork, rules, and restrictions and more taxes. But the second you say, oh, maybe we should verify who someone is before they vote, all of a sudden it's, oh no, that's too complicated. That's too burdensome. That's too inefficient. People are dumb. They can't be able to uphold their civil duty as a citizen to be able to get a voter ID. Like, really? That's where you draw the line? That's where government suddenly needs to be simple and streamlined? It's completely backwards. And if there is any area where you want strong safeguards, where you want clear rules, where you want accountability, it should be elections. Do you think?
Representing 0.00028% of the more than 5.7 million votes cast.
Michiganders are good people and we are smart people. What we don't want to see is a bunch of extra red tape, paperwork, and bureaucracy slowing down our elections. We know our system, we know our clerks, and we know that our elections are safe.
Voting advocates say the ballot measure seeks to disenfranchise voters and point to support from out-of-state billionaires.
What we're seeing with this petition is part of a wider national power grab by selfish politicians, wealthy elites, and those who are trying to take political power away from the voters, away from the people.
But Americans for Citizen Voting says its effort is straightforward and well-intentioned.
When people contribute to fixing our broken election process, we think that's a good thing, not a.
It is a good thing. It's common sense, right? So that's the foundation of everything else, right? where you want accountability, and it should be elections. And that's why what's happening right now at the state level is so important. Because you got hundreds of thousands of signatures, over 750,000 in some cases, just to get voter ID on the ballot. That means people are engaged.
Bad thing.
The gathered signatures are well over the 446,000 needed, but the Bureau of Elections says they aren't likely to be certified until at least May, after candidate signatures are certified. At the Capitol in Lansing, I'm Remington Hernandez reporting.
So there you have it, right? There you have it. That means voters actually want a say in this. And I think Republicans need to recognize the opportunity here and treat this like the rally and cry that is going into the midterms, especially in those key states where this is going to be decided directly by voters. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people like to sit back and complain, oh, Republicans aren't doing enough. They're not getting anything done. But you have to look at the reality of the situation. Congress right now is basically split down the middle. The Senate is razor thin. The House is razor thin. Republicans don't have the kind of majority that allows them to just push through major legislation like the SAVE Act without resistance. And unless you're talking about getting rid of the filibuster, which Republicans are not unified on and frankly shouldn't be rushing to do, you're not going to see sweeping changes at the federal level with a 50-50 balance of power. That's just the truth. So if people actually want to see these policies implemented, if they want to see stronger election integrity laws, and the answer is pretty simple. You have to show up and vote in the midterms. You have to expand that majority, because with a stronger majority, now you can actually pass legislation. Now you can actually enforce these standards. And now you can actually get something like the SAVE Act across the finish line. And in the meantime, the smartest political strategy for Republicans is to keep this issue front and center. Keep on pressing along while the iron is hot, and keep the iron hot. Keep talking about voter ID, keep pushing the SAVE Act, and most importantly, put Democrats on record. Force them to vote on a clean voter ID bill. No excuses, no distractions, no loopholes. Because if they truly support what they claim to support, then they should have no problem voting for it. But we all know how that's going to go. And when that happens, it will make it crystal clear to the American people that Democrats are out of step with the overwhelming majority of this country. Because most Americans agree with this. This is not a fringe issue. This is common sense. So yeah, I think voter ID should absolutely be a central issue going into the midterms, especially in the states where it's already on the ballot. Republicans should lean into it. They should highlight it, and they should use it to draw a clear contrast between themselves and Democrats. But at the end of the day, I want to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on your post notifications so you don't miss any future content. I'll catch you next one, family. Peace.